Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Consciousness Review radio show. I'm Miriam Knight, and our guest today is Kent Nerburn, the author of Letters to My Son and The Wolf at Twilight and Neither Wolf Nor Dog, both of which won the Minnesota Book Award. Today, we're going to discuss his most recent work, Ordinary Sacred. It joins his other two books, Simple Truths and Small Graces, as the conclusion of a trilogy just filled with spiritual insights and inspirational stories. Welcome, Kent. I'm so delighted to have you with us.
And I'm happy to be here.
Well, now tell us a bit about your background.
Well, let's see. The short form is that I'm born and raised in Minnesota. Traveled around the country, went to school in a number of places, did graduate work at Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley and at the University of California. Got a PhD in theology and art, did a lot of training in sculpture, actually wanted to become a sculptor of religious images in sort of a non-traditional form, and studied in Europe, in Germany and Italy. Ended up coming back to the Pacific Northwest for a while, and then came back to the land of my birth, though much further north, and up in the land of the pines and the lakes in northern Minnesota, where I had the interesting opportunity come upon me to go work on an oral history project on the Red Lake Reservation, the Ojibwe Reservation, in northern Minnesota. And that sort of changed my direction from sculpture to writing. And it didn't remove me completely from sculpture, and I certainly still think as a sculptor and see the world in visual terms, but the fascination of working among Native people and with Native people and dealing with their beliefs and their way of life allowed me to travel down a road as a writer, and I've done that ever since for about 20 years.
Oh, wow. This is very rich territory to mine. Let's start with your PhD in theology and art. That's an interesting combination. What led you in that direction?
I had always been fascinated with human belief. It seems to me we're believing creatures more than thinking creatures. Our belief guides our thoughts. What we believe, whether it be religious or otherwise, defines who we are, defines how we see the world, defines how we choose from the myriad of variables that are out there when we construct the reality that we see around us. And I had done my undergraduate work in American Studies, and that was fascinated with belief as it expressed itself in the American experience. I wasn't quite sure what to do with graduate school. Like many people coming out of their undergraduate years, I was staring at a confusing welter of options, and applied for, and after a misstep at Stanford, ended up at Graduate Theological Union, where they said I could be a practitioner of sculpture as well as a theoretician. And I'd come to this because while I was at Stanford, they had a very fascinating program in religious studies, but it was all from the outside. It was a comparative religion program. And I had applied there because I wanted to follow up on this belief, this interest in belief, and so I just wanted the broader scope of religious studies. A year at Stanford proved to not be a very good fit for a number of reasons. So they said, well, you need to do language work anyway. Why don't you go to Germany? So I went to Germany and said, I'll learn. That's what I'll do. I'll go to Germany, learn German in Germany. It's much better than sitting in a classroom in a Palo Alto summer. So I did. I went to Germany and hitchhiked. I got off a plane in Amsterdam, stuck out my thumb, hitchhiked into the middle of Germany, where I was told they probably spoke the best German, and found myself sitting there unable to say a word, didn't know what I had done, but had to make my way. In the course of that, I ended up knocking on doors saying I wanted to do handwork. I figured out to say, ich möchte Handwerk machen, or whatever what it was at the time. Basically,
you mean like little odd jobs and things?
Anything with my hands, because I figured if you work with your hands, you have to speak about objects. And thus you learn nouns, and you learn basic verbs, I want, I need, give, take. It was a chance to interact and have whatever I found and I didn't know what it would be. It would allow me to not just sit around trying to find people to talk to, but I would be working for someone about something that they cared about, and I didn't want to be paid. I just wanted to do work with my hands. Well, as fate would have it, I fell in with I knocked on the door of a woman who had she must have been in her 50s. She had a shop where she sold batik, and she did batik. And she said, my son restores antiques, and maybe you should go talk to him. She could speak a little English. So I went down and I held my hands out, tried to explain it to him, and he said, come and work with me. So it's a long way around to get where we're going, but it's kind of interesting in a way. I worked with him restoring antiques in this little workshop in Marburg, and towards the end of my stay there, I started wandering around these little museums, and they have in these German museums what they call Bauernkunst, farmer art, where they had made old crucifixes and forms. They didn't have any technical skills. What they had was purity of belief and purity of expression. And I looked at those and said, there's more belief and more faith and more honest spirituality in those than in all the teachings I'm doing at Stanford. And I asked if I could begin to sculpt, if I could try to sculpt. He had a couple of old chisels and gave me a piece of maple and said, go to it. So I started hitting on that piece of maple, and I couldn't stop. It was the most magical experience of my life. Almost everything else I'd ever done had been driven by the clock. And in this case, no, time got in my way. I loved working it so much. So I finished a sculpture, a small sculpture over there, went back to the people at Stanford, and they said, I said, I want to do religious sculpture. And they said, well, we think you've had a mental breakdown. Can't do that. You take off, go see what your life is all about. Well, I did, and through a period of time, ended up working with a Greek woodcarver in Minnesota, and ended up back at Graduate Theological Union, where they said, yes, you can come as a sculptor, but you can practice. You can be a sculptor and you can become, if you chose to teach, you can teach from the bench rather than from a desk. So I worked on sculpture, worked on the theory of religious sculpture, studied Donatello, Michelangelo, and Rodin, and just fell in love with the process. I did have the limitation that I often tell the people, the curse I give to people, or hopefully I don't choose to curse too many, but the curse that I give to artists, if I really wanted to give them the true curse, is may you be great but not good. I had moments where I was great, but I wasn't a natural. I didn't have the fundamental skills to do it the way that some people I saw who had much less understanding than I did, but had it in their hands, were able to do. So I stayed with it. I continued. I did a number of large sculptures that are in places. There's one up in Mission, British Columbia, not too far from you, in a monastery where I lived for 6 months to do a sculpture for them. They did them all out of wood. They were all pieces carved from large trees. And that was really though I had the doctorate, it was the sculpture that mattered to me. And no one really wanted someone who was a sculptor. No college wanted someone who was a sculptor who had a PhD in art. And where were they going to put me? I was, like I said, if anyone wanted what I did, I was the onlyest one around. but no one wanted it. So anyway, I stuck with my sculpture, and then I moved back to the Midwest and took odd jobs here and there, drove cab, which was a very pivotal experience in my life, drove cab overnight for a while in Minneapolis, and met my wife, and we moved up to northern Minnesota. And the opportunity came. I was trying to do my sculpture, and it was... it
was still religious sculpture, yes?
Still religious, yes, religious sculpture in the broadest sense of the term. I wanted to inhabit of forms with a spiritual presence. Like my doctorate was a sculpture of John the Baptist and an exegesis of John the Baptist. Mm-hmm. I wanted to try to learn the man, learn everything I could about him through a study of the gospel narratives and the historical context, and then try to embody his spiritual presence in a sculpture. In this case, it was a large piece of a large walnut tree trunk, about 10 feet tall. But that was my approach. I wanted to put the presence of a spiritual presence. They became long meditations for me to create these spiritual presences embodied in a human form, and that was the goal. That was what I was trying to do, and I was making a fumbling way with it, and I loved the work, but it really was not economically viable. And like I said, I had that limitation of not always being as capable as I wanted to be. I would have visions, I would have understanding that I couldn't put forth in forms. So anyway, little short conclusion to all of this. I had an opportunity came to do an oral history project on the Red Lake Reservation in northern Minnesota, and it appealed to me because in the course of doing the sculpture, I had learned something very fundamental and almost spiritually, well, it was very spiritually significant and almost mystical. And that was that as much as I would try to inhabit a tree with an idea, with a spiritual idea, the tree began to talk back to me. You spend 6 months, a year with an object, or with anyone. You're in a room with anyone, and you get to know that person very well. I would always work with chisels. I didn't want to use chainsaws or anything, so it was always with chisels. And I got to know those trees to the point where they talked back to me, and they made demands on me that imposed themselves on me rather than me imposing my own spiritual ideas or aesthetic ideas on them. And I remember there was one oak tree I always talk about. It was the saddest tree I ever worked in. It probably had been diseased. It had grown in a very difficult place. And you could feel this with every stroke, just the way it resisted the wood, it resisted the chisel, the smell that came out of it, the feel. It was a heartbroken tree, and I just hated working in that tree. Then there were others that were joyous. Some were very meditative. Different woods have different characters, and no one talked about this except the native people. The Iroquois would carve their masks in live trees in order to have the spirit of the tree in them. This kind of understanding drew me to native ways and native thinking. So when that opportunity to do this oral history project on this little isolated, well, actually very big isolated reservation in Lakes and Pines country in northern Minnesota came, I said, I think I'd like to go work with native people.
Wow.
And so I did. And then I'll just bring us to how we get to the writing in the book.